A break from the league, but no break from the action as the FAI Cup takes centre stage this weekend. I'm Aidan O'Hara. I'm joined on independent.ie by Daniel McDonnell. And Dan, I suppose as we did last week, before we look forward, we should probably look back at the European action as 2 wins from 4 ties. The league probably gets a pass mark overall, but there seems to be a little bit of a sense of disappointment, certainly with the Dublin clubs.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think not surprised Dundalk and Derry went through. I was at the Dundalk game. They made hard work of it, heavy weather of it. Sort of making the point in a sort of a newsletter, reminded me of this round last year watching Sligo Rovers play Ballatown from Wales, and most of the Ballatown players were over 30, seasoned, savvy, know-how, not great, but nightmare to play against. And I think there's something I'd like maybe a piece down the line. It's a view from various people around the game about the League of Ireland at the moment, right? It's probably a better product. It's a younger profile that we speak about, nice to watch. But, it's funny, like you're sort of watching some of the teams in Europe, and I think they're viewed maybe as easier to play against. And you can see maybe that lack of like character at times. And I think there's something in that in the European results. And look, these are cup ties, right? I think, people make the point, people exaggerate what does it say about the level on the basis of a small sample size? I mean, we have cup games this weekend, and if Avondale beat Wexford, does that mean like the Munster Senior League is stronger than the first division? No, it's a cup tie, and certain attributes will come to the fore. And I think we've seen that a little bit with certain teams, that the inconsistencies at home have shone in Europe. So, I mean, looking generally at the week, the Dundalk hard work of it got through. Derry, better side against Tórshavn, but again, Derry aren't like prolific goal scorers, so they were the better side over 2 legs and 1-1-0. Pats, I mean, just they're defending terrible, absolutely dreadful against Dudelange, and self-inflicted mistakes. And I don't know what to say about that one, really. I mean, they've conceded 5 goals in 2 games. They could have conceded way more. Yet they benefited and scored some goals, benefited from one comical own goal. But I mean, John Daly went to Malta to watch Gazira and Glentoran last week with a view to, I suppose, the second round, and probably reflects a degree of confidence. And like the difference between losing in the first round and making the third round is like a 600,000 euros. So like that's costly. And at Shamrock Rovers, I mean, I think we have higher standards of them because they have quite a seasoned, experienced team.
Yeah.
Some of the other sides have some players in their first season in senior football, particularly Dundalk, and Pats have some very young players involved. I mean, Rovers, we're expecting more of them at this stage. And while Broadwick, I think we're quite good. And again, Rovers were down a few bodies, so it wasn't the best version of Rovers. But I guess you expect with the body of experience they have that they could sort of manage those games better. But they look quite easy to play against too, and a lot of chances. And I think that is the thing I would take away. I think people get a little bit carried away too much. Reading a lot, you see a lot of mad 1-off or 2-off results, across Europe. The champions of the Faroes beating Ferencváros, which is a nightmare for Rovers because they now play Ferencváros. But it's more maybe how easy our teams have been to play against that I would look at as a team, as opposed to thinking this means the standard is terrible. I think the standard is still decent. It's just in these cup ties, certain naiveties are being exposed.
Yeah, I think it's something, the word that I think other people used last week was about Rovers not being tested at home. I think maybe the word punished is probably a better word, where their mistakes, we'll say even mistakes Pat's made the other night, where you might get away with that on a Friday night in league or against a lot of teams. But even no matter what country you're playing against, most of the time it's the champions of that country, and they do punish. You've seen it over the years. How many times have you, like, that phrase self-inflicted? I'm sure it goes on in other countries as well, but it does seem to be something that every time Europe rolls around, you're talking about self-inflicted wounds and defeat.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is I just think when teams are in the league play against each other, they're probably more confident about the outcome of mistakes in a strange way because it's more familiarity. I mean, these are huge games, and there probably is that fear of, like, I don't know, it's the fear of failure is probably there a little bit as well. The implications are so huge. I mean, they are mad games. Like these are. I know people. It's a familiar line. This game is worth X amount of times more than winning the league. It's just one of these points. But I suppose it is also true to an extent. That even the 300 grand on each round in the Conference League, and like for someone like like a team in Gibraltar or a team in the Faroes, that's also huge money.
That's huge for them, yeah.
And so of course they're going to go for it like it's, Ireland in Australia trying to get a point in the last 20 minutes of a World Cup game. Like it's everything on the line for all these teams, and that's why you'll often find that when Irish teams go up now to the next round and they're probably in the underdog status, wouldn't surprise me if you saw some better 90-minute performances from teams in that scenario. But the Rovers one is particularly damaging because they've ended up playing Ferencváros in the next round. They've sacked their manager. They could be in a bad place, but I think Rovers, nearly every other team in that round, they'd probably fancy themselves against, and would be sort of borderline favourites or up there. But this one is just, that's rough, and they're looking at a big hole in their budget potentially, and that's why even things like the cup become very important for them.
Yeah. It's not quite 300 grand for making to the next round of the FAI Cup, but Rovers and Dundalk on Sundays, pick of the games, and then tonight Bows and Shells. These teams, speaking of familiarity, these teams know each other very well at this point. It was probably the low point of both season last year, this cup tie. Like, would you expect a bit more freedom between these two teams this time around, or tight again?
Yeah, it was a better game last week, I must say, like the league game, and there was that sense that everything was on the line. And I suppose in the cup game last year in Tolka, Bows just rolled over. They were pathetic, really. Whereas I think this time round, okay, it's in Dalymount. After last week, I'd be more optimistic of this being a decent game, I have to say, because there was a sense last week, neither of these teams being in Europe, there was a game they both probably needed to win. And okay, tonight, you have the spectre of extra time and penalties, and I'm sure you get to a stage where a team gets ahead and try and close it out. But again, I'm not sure if they have I think, that actually made it a good finish last week, because Shells tried to close out, probably maybe went too conservative too early. You could argue went to a back five. Bows had a good bench and it was a good finish. So I'm actually looking forward to this game now on the basis of last week. And I don't know how to call it. I think Shells probably had Bows' number last week. And Bows have this habit of going behind in games and finishing strongly, which is a great trait to have, and it emphasises the strength of their squad. But you just wonder in knockout football, are they going to be punished for that tendency? But I'm looking forward to it. I think it's by far the pick of the round.
Yeah, absolutely. And elsewhere tonight, we draw against Sligo, UCD Cove. They're the all-league ties. I think Kerry then play Ringmahon Rangers, Kilbarrack host Finn Harps, and Wexford host Avondale. Do you see any shocks in that? It's very difficult to judge, obviously, with the non-league teams, but can you see any shocks in those other 5 games?
Yeah, I should say by far the pick of the round, of course. I mean, the Dalkin Rovers, but in terms by far the pick of Friday.
This evening, yes.
Yeah, it's hard to know about shocks. I mean, like, because you're going to draw United Sligo Rovers game is one where I don't even know what constitutes would constitute a surprise in that scenario. But I know we're talking. I mean, that is a game where it's a big one, but those two teams looking over their shoulder too. Maybe a bigger game for Sligo Rovers, because they would have had European ambitions at the start of the season. I'm not sure about Drogheda, like staying up as their priority. But in terms of the interest of this round, in some cases for a lot of people, and I know you're steeped in amateur football when you were sort of playing yourself, is can the clubs land a blow? Like last year, it was really poor. In fact, in recent years, they found it tough. And as you know, they're coming into pre-season in a lot of cases. And also the amateur game in general has struggled in recent years with player retention and clubs folding. And it's been a tricky time in that world. Now, I do think they have a chance of landing a couple of blows. Tonight, I think Kilbarrack against Finn Harps is one where could be of interest. They haven't moved venue and they're sort of clearly confident of giving it a go. And I think the Kerry Ringmahon game is a weird one. When Kerry are the worst team in the first division, they're a new team. Ringmahon of there's players have been through a lot more together, and like Gareth Morrissey involved. They were a decent outfit. So there are 2 games to look out for. I think I suppose the junior football, non-league football community would be pretty despondent if all of their teams were to lose to league opposition in this round, given there's a couple of ties where they might fancy it. But yeah, Cove away at UCD is another one, obviously, that could be would it constitute a shock? Maybe it would.
Yeah, it's probably podcasting that as well. Dan, thanks very much for joining us, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you.